into Repulsive TV. This is episode 8. I'm Ralphie Repulsive. I'm the bass player slash singer for Order of the Fly, and I'm also the synth slash drum recorder slash sequencer slash guitar player slash bass player slash singer for a band called End, sort of an industrial punk band. Thanks for tuning in. If this is your first time showing up, nice to meet you. If this is your 5th or 6th time checking it out, thank you very much for tuning back in. This will be a short one. I'm flying solo this evening, so I just wanted to talk about a couple of cool things, a couple cool records, some news, and then maybe just a quick little heartfelt thank you. So, just to kick it off, didn't buy any really new records this week, except I do want to bring up that Vampire Stepdad, my favorite synthwave guy, released a new Halloween-themed EP, and it's excellent. It's fantastic. In fact, it's so good that I'm almost like distressed at the cover art, which I get what he's doing. Okay, so here's the cover art. I'll put it here. Boop. Right? Okay, so I wish I could play a sample, but I implore everyone to go ahead and check out on Bandcamp or VampireStepdad.com this album. It's excellent. It's very well done, and it's supposed to be like the pitch is that it's an album to play, out your window for trick-or-treaters to listen to as they walk by. However, he is underselling himself. This album is fantastic. It is a beautiful, soundtrack ambient piece, and I think it sells itself short with the album cover art. I close my eyes. I don't want to say I have synesthesia, but I do have a very visual memory when it comes to music. An album cover, I think of the songs when I see the album cover art. The prevailing colors that are incorporated into the artwork are what I always go to mentally as far as what I'm going to think about when I think of that album. So, for instance, for Pretty Hate Machine by Nine Inch Nails, which is one of my favorite albums, I always think of all the songs in a blue and a purple and a black. If I think of any of the songs off Downward Spiral, however, also by Nine Inch Nails, I tend to think of them in colors like that Russell Mills palette of rust and decay, flesh tones, earth tones, muted colors. So, the album cover art, I can't get it out of my head once I see it and hear the music together, and I sort of make that synesthetic link. It's just there forever. So no matter what the album is, I'm always going to associate it with the album cover. Now, the new Vampire Stepdad is outstanding. The music is fantastic. I love it, and I love the intention of the album cover itself. The album cover is obviously like a throwback to those classic, just Sounds of Halloween type records and tapes and CDs that you used to be able to get that you just sort of put on in the background. That would be like, goblins going ooh, and like chains clanking, and like some electrode, like so a couple of like some Jacob's Ladder thing, sound effects kind of sounds. But the music itself is too good for that. I think what he needs to do is after the Halloween season is over, re-release it on vinyl, all right, with a totally redone album cover, something abstract and dark, that just can sort of, I mean, honestly, it would be if you gave it like a dungeon synth, which is one of the other genres that I really enjoy, and I'd love to do a whole episode discussing how great Mortis is, who kind of is the founder of, or I don't want to say founder, but he is definitely the biggest name in dungeon synth, at least his era 1 type stuff. Mortis is just fantastic. I could do a whole episode describing how fucking great he is. I love that guy. But yeah, so I think what needs to happen with the new Vampire Stepdad album is I'd like to see a new album cover that really gives it the seriousness that the work deserves. The work itself is fantastic. The music is outstanding. So, anyways, enough of fawning over my favorite synthwave guy, Vampire Stepdad. Vlad, if you're happening to see this, if you happen to see this, you're fantastic. I love the new stuff. In other sort of music land news, there are certain bands that have been a massively huge influence on me that I would really love to discuss their impact, and I need to do it in a thoughtful and sort of researched way. Skinny Puppy is a huge one that I just need to do a very long, serious sort of dissection of their work. Nine Inch Nails is another one. Kiss, Alice Cooper, all these different bands. But there's another one that I think I'm just going to discuss tonight, and it's a specific record, and because it draws me back to a specific point in time, and there's so many different memories associated with it and sort of nostalgic things for me, I just wanted to talk about Queen. So I think in the world of horror punk band, which Order of the Fly is, I think, part of, one of the issues I have with a lot of the... Wait, that sounds wrong. I don't mean it in a sort of diss way, but I don't think that anybody is served by having a limited palette of sounds to choose from. And I think typically most bands that are involved in the horror punk scene like to obviously lean heavily on the Misfit style. Maybe venture off into, say, 45 Grave or TSOL. And some metal, I think, typically gets incorporated. But to be honest, I mean, the primary influence is only one band, and it's the one band everybody agrees on that they like in your band. The sounds are going to be very derivative. So you need to branch out. So just like any sort of polymath, you need to you don't want to limit yourself. Try to expand your mind as much as possible. Look to everything. So one of the bands that got me thinking about this is Queen. And how much of an impact they had on me as a young guy. So when I was in high school, I think I mentioned this in one of the other episodes, there was a small little mom and pop place called the Record and Tape Exchange in Fairfax. It's actually in like the Fair City Mall, if it's still there, if anybody lives out there. And it was a small little like mom and pop, and what you would do, it was great because I grew up in the era where tapes were the predominant physical manifestation of music. And, I can't remember how much they cost. They were a fair amount. And then CDs came into vogue, and they were pretty expensive, to be honest. So, people could have continued like buying tapes, or they could have continued buying CDs for a pricier level. But vinyl was all but forgotten, almost. It was sort of like the kind of thing you'd find at like garage sales. So the Record and Tape Exchange was one of those places where you could go buy records for cheap. And I had one of those old stereo systems where it had a tape deck and a record player, and you could tape the records. So I did that with a lot of Alice Cooper records that you couldn't find on CD or tape. And I started to collect other albums from guys that I didn't have enough money to like save up for, the full tape. So one of the major records that I bought that was absolutely mind-blowing was Queen Live Killers. Okay, now I'm not sure how you pronounce this. Is it Queen Killers Live? Because the Live's kind of got a different font. Is it Queen Live Killers? I don't know. Who knows? Queen. It's a live album. It's a double LP. It's got this awesome gatefold where it's just like, okay, so this thing, when I was making the dub tape of it, you could just look at all these different like shots from tons of different shows. It's this huge collage, and each album itself comes in a slip sleeve. One's green, one's red, and they are sort of in order. They've got this great sort of just a dense amount of text that explains basically Queen itself and goes into their history. It's like, so what I would do listening to this as I taped it is just sit and read this whole thing as I'm listening to the album itself, and look at the pictures, and it's like all these different like awesome live shots of the band Um, and it would be like, it was this totally immersive experience. It is hands down my favorite live album that I have. There's, I would say, other than that, Evil Live is a great one by the Misfits. It sounds like dog shit, but it's just such a great moment in time. You know, it's got Henry as doing backups, quote unquote backups on 138, where it's essentially just him grunting, and then you've got, it's just like a very raw punk experience. That feels like a Misfits live album. Then there's Kiss Alive or Alive 2. Both are like fantastic, but you know they went in and did tons of overproduction. Which is still okay. I don't mind that at all. I like the idea of a live record being, it's still a record, so tweak it, fix it, make it sound good. But this Queen one, oh my god, it captured the band at its height. It's got so many freaking great songs on it. It's basically a greatest hits up until, I think it was the tour for the game, so it's got everything up until the game on there. My all-time favorite Queen song, Somebody to Love, is not on this, unfortunately, which I would love to hear live. Or that, or One Vision. When my friend, who I mentioned before, Doug Jacobson, and I would sit around and like listen to, and we would rent these like VHS tapes and stuff. One of them was like Queen live at Live Aid. That was like a huge one. That one major one, I'm not sure if that's the same one, or maybe it's at Wembley Stadium or something, but there's a major Queen live show where they start with One Vision, and Freddie's got the sort of marching band thing and the white pants. I don't know. But anyways, that live album is just like insane, that live VHS. But anyways, this record still trumps all of that stuff. It's got this sort of raw element. The liner notes go into the whole description of how the band decided to do certain things. It gives you a setup for, like, there's a certain like sort of like almost acoustic duet that happens with Freddie and Brian May, and it describes in detail like what that would be like. So you really feel like, I mean, this album was recorded probably when I was like 5 years old, so I clearly did not go to this show, but it gives you the feeling that you're there. It's a very immersive experience. If I ever do a live album, this is like 100% the template I would follow, because it's just perfect. Not to mention that their ability to play is just amazing, and the crowd itself is singing along the whole time. It's freaking awesome. They've got this great live version. It starts off with a live version of We Will Rock You, which is totally different from the typical We Will Rock You that we know and love. So if you get a chance and you don't have it, I know they have it on iTunes, but get the vinyl version, just because Queen is one of those bands you really do have to experience on vinyl. What is it? A Night at the Opera. They're probably their magnum opus. That was like, when I was just reading, it was recorded in 1975, which is the world's greatest year, because that happened to be the year that I was born. And it was the most expensive album recorded to date. So it was I don't know what the even equivalent of, but it's just it's so full of thick studio trickery. I think my love for that kind of sound is what led into my love for things like Nine Inch Nails or Skinny Puppy, or the whole industrial world, where the studio itself is an instrument. It's not just that you're good at bass or you're good at guitar and you can sing okay or whatever. It's like, it recognizes that the studio itself and the tricks you can do in a studio and all the different aspects to sound design, that's part of making an album. Not only part, but that's probably the primary, that's the most important instrument you can learn is the studio. And most bands don't do that. I know a lot of guys that are really good at bass, better than me. A lot of guys that are way better at me on guitar, and pretty much everybody's a better singer than I am. But I don't know too many other band member, or actually I'll be honest, I don't know any other bands that I play with on a regular basis or that I've met that are halfway as knowledgeable as I am in the studio, and that's such a massive aspect. I think it gets overlooked and it gets sort of farmed out to other people who have that skill set. It's so important to learn that, because it's just like, it would be like choosing to pick two colors to paint a picture with, where there's an infinite amount of colors to choose from if you only like learn that. It's a big learning curve, but once you learn it, and I'm not saying I'm like some fantastic studio guy either, but I've learned enough that I understand how to make an album, how to master an album, mix it down properly. I can do everything self-contained myself, and I literally have. So I think it's one of those things where people are selling themselves short by not taking the time to really understand how, like, a specific DAW, just pick one, choose one, doesn't matter which one, could be Pro Tools, Sonar, or Cubase. I don't even know what else is out. Fruity Loops, Reaper. Pick one and learn it. So that's all the music shenanigans I'm going to talk about for the evening. Let me see where I'm at time-wise. Okay. So that's kind of it for my music wrap-up. I just wanted to bring up that album. I wanted to do a night of 7-inch reviews, so I pulled out a stack of 7 inches, but there was one specific 7-inch I wanted to talk about, and I can't find it. It's an Impaler Rip Snorter split. As far as horror punk goes, when we came into it, we were part of like a very nascent genre that hadn't really been established. So there were a lot of bands that were sort of doing their own thing similarly. I mean, like, I'd say Cancer Slug is one. What's some other big ones from the era? Oh man, my memory sucks, so I can't really think of a few, but of course, frickin' probably the biggest would be Blitzkid. So there were not that many bands doing this when we started. One of the major ones that stood out, though, that I picked up a 7-inch, and I wouldn't even really consider them horror punk. They're too original to be classified like that. But Impaler, they use gore effects, makeup effects, and have like a sort of proto metal sound, but still melodic. Man, they're fantastic. So I'm gonna have to find that 7-inch and do a proper review because I really do want to talk about them as far as one of those albums that I picked up when I first was starting doing this. Like, holy shit, this is like a kindred spirit somewhere. I haven't met these guys, but man, this is legit. And I also, there are other things I did want to talk about too, just little fact corrections of things that I talked about. When I was doing my little comic book album, or comic book show with Tom, I mentioned Paul Pope does double size up. It's bigger than double. I mean, double size really is 17 by 11, which is the classic comic book style artwork size, but it's bigger. It's like 19 by 24 or something. It's a massive size. So that's what lends his artwork a specific flair. Okay, so I just wanted to correct that. I don't know why that bugged me, but I felt like an idiot saying that. So getting things like that out of the way. One other thing I've noticed too is that I don't finish my thoughts. So if you are watching this and you feel like I go off on tangents, and I really am sorry, I'm a very scatterbrained guy. I tend to think of like, oh man, and I'll be like, I gotta talk about this, and I'll start talking about it, and then I'll go off, and I won't even finish what I was talking about in the first place. So I'm gonna do a better job at that in the future. I think next time, what I think I'm gonna start doing is like making little note cards to keep my brain on track. But before I get too off track, this is just gonna wrap it up. I just wanted to tell anybody that came to the show, we played a show the other night. It was actually the first show that we've played since I came back from overseas, and it was a small affair. It was in like a little spaghetti restaurant. It wasn't what I was expecting. I'm used to playing fairly sizable shows. We've played some pretty big places. This one was great. At first, I was kind of bummed because I saw the PA and it was just two little speakers, and I was like, man, for my first show back, I want it to be epic. But then I thought, you know what, this is really like, we're starting back at square one. It was a very intimate kind of a show, and I cannot tell you, for those of you that are watching now that showed up, how much that meant to me. It was, as far as just, I'm going to drop the veil of the typical Ralphie Repulsive vibe. But I'm not that great with expressing myself sometimes. I think why I need to play music is because it gives me an outlet to express myself in a way that I can sort of address feelings that I have that are not comfortable for me to deal with any other way. If for anybody that's been a fan of the band, or cares enough to actually like read the liner notes and learn the songs and stuff like that, it is it tends to err on the dark side of things, and it tends to be not the typical like horror punk fare where it's talking about monster movies or whatever. Sometimes I do. And I try to sort of blend a little bit of that in there, but honestly, it's like sort of my way of just sort of getting shit off my chest and addressing feelings that I'm uncomfortable with, that are hard for me to express otherwise. And the sound, I hate to like talk about it because it makes me sound like I'm some like arrogant artiste, and I don't feel that way, but it gives me an outlet, and it gives me a specific outlet that whether you think it sucks, or whether you think my lyrics are shit, or if you think they're great, it doesn't matter to me. I mean, it does a little bit, but it doesn't matter to me in the level that I think that it's very important for me to be able to have this ability to express myself, for better or worse, to just sort of get this shit off my chest. And I do deal with a lot of things that I wouldn't say I'm depressed, but I feel like I suffer from a heavy amount of melancholy. I am just a very melancholic person by nature. I don't want to I don't know. I don't want to do too much of a I'm hesitant to be too confessional. This isn't like a confession or anything, but the music is for my music has never been anything that I've tried to be like I want to like pick up chicks with. I'm not like here to to impress the ladies. There are plenty of bands that do that much better than I am. I'm not like some like attractive, sexy dude. What I'm trying to impress, or at least connect with, are those like kids like me at 16 that felt lost, which I still feel at 43. I feel like my life took a turn somewhere along the way, and I'm just like, I can't find my way back to the way I really think it should be. I've had moments along the way where things have turned out much better than I've thought. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to my life right now that are much better than I could have imagined, but then there's still that like melancholic heart of me. So I really am touched. The only reason I'm even bringing this up is just to show you, like, just I do treat it seriously when people show up to shows, because I feel like the people that do come up and talk to me and mention that they understand this connection, or they understand what I'm trying to say, it's a connection that I don't think that anybody can really understand just how important that is, or how impactful that can be to somebody. When you work really hard at something and somebody comes up and tells you, hey, this song X, Y, and Z, or whatever, this lyric impacted me or had some sort of effect. We played with friends that we hadn't seen in a very long time. Had to check the time there. I played with friends I hadn't seen in a very long time. I got a chance to see a lot of people that I had not seen in years, and regardless, because even before I left, we hadn't really been playing a whole lot of shows because I'd kind of been focusing on End a lot more. And this show really made me remember why I need this in my life, and why I feel like this is important. And I hope that there are a few people that like I'm connecting with that sort of like understand that. So I just want to say a deep, very sincere, heartfelt thank you to everybody that came to that show, because we specifically made sure that we could play somewhere that was free. Because I just wanted to have people be able to feel like they could come. It was a Thursday, so it wasn't that easy to make for people that worked. It wasn't easy for me. I had to dip out the second it was over. But just seeing a lot of those faces of people that I had not seen in a long time, it really just, man, I don't know how much I can, or how to express properly just how deeply that affected me. It was a really truly humbling and great experience, and it made me realize, just after all these years of doing like a band, just how many friends that you make, and how many interesting people you meet, and how many people with like individual stories that are just also filled with their own they've got everybody's got their own interesting story to tell. And I love to meet and talk to everybody that shows up. So it was great to meet some new people, but seeing some of the people that I haven't seen in years, it just really was. I hope you guys are watching now, just so I can tell you deeply, like, sincerely, thank you, man. Guys like Chris, George, frickin' John, James, Jones. Oh man, I could just list like a million, but I don't want to like list everybody by name because then I feel like I'm just gonna single people out. Rallis, but man, it just seeing you guys there, that meant a lot. So thank you very much. I hope you guys, I hope you get to come out to more shows. I don't like hold it against you if you can't, because I know how it is. I work a job too, so I know how hard it is to make it to shows, especially local shows. But I feel like we do have a good connection, so I would like to, just extend my heartfelt thanks and tell you how much that meant to me. That's it. So that's all I wanted to say for tonight. Hope you guys have watched this. This is kind of a bit of a letdown as far as like any sort of interesting new stuff, but I did want to leave you with a couple of things. As another loose end to tie up, I can't remember which episode it was, but one of them we were talking about it was one of those ones where we were talking about, it was the one before the one we were dogging on other bands that had maybe bit us or not, but I mentioned a couple of the new things. Okay, so sorry, there was like a little technical hiccup, but I actually caught it this time. So anywho, just to wrap it up, so there were a couple of songs that we talked about that we were working on, and I realized I kind of dangled that out there. If anybody is interested, I'm going to play a couple of clips of a couple of the new ones that we're working on. So keep in mind, this is still demo type stuff. The album is in progress. We're making headway. I'm making small amounts of headway here and there. My goal is in the next weekend or so, next time I have some time to really sit down and sink my teeth into it, I want to try and finish up the vocals on the last couple of songs. But we mentioned one of the songs that was sort of a bit of like had a very AFI feel, and we kind of ripped them off by unintentionally, but then after driving around and listening to every single possible AFI song, I figured out specifically the segment that it reminded me of. It's that end of, or the end of the bridge of Lost Souls off of Art of Drowning. So take a quick listen, tell me what you think. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope you're enjoying the show. I would love you guys to ask questions of me that I could address on this camera. I'm not very good at Facebook, as everybody knows. I'm not a big social media dude. This is kind of my only social media outlet. So I would love to spend time, get a chance to like chat about things that interest anybody that is watching, and I would love to connect with some of the other horror punk bands out there. I would think it would be awesome to get a chance to talk to guys like Goolsby or TB or frickin' anybody from, I don't know, what are some other good ones? Anybody from Impaler, anybody from the Spooky, the guys in the Returners. There's plenty of guys. The Resurrects, Stellar Corpses, and now if I've listed bands, Orwell's Nightmare, frickin', I'm gonna feel like a jerk if I don't list a bunch of names, but I'm not very good at thinking on the fly, so please don't take offense. You're in there. There's plenty of other bands out there. I want to sit down with James from The Lonely Stars, who played with us the other night, and the Orwell's Nightmare. Both of you guys, thank you very much for playing the show. You guys were both fantastic. It was great. It was like it brought me back to like 2001, but just in a different way. I'd love to talk to Craig from 1031, Man the Machine, White Line Nightmare. So, anywho, I guess I'm going to kind of wrap it up there before I stutter more than I already have. Thanks, you guys. I really do appreciate you guys watching and checking in, and I hope that this is fun, and please, ask me some questions or comment below. Please hit subscribe if you're new, and if you're not new, or if you've been watching, please feel free to share. I would love to like talk to other folks that may have some interest in this kind of stuff and discuss records, and maybe sit down and talk cool artists and records and music and stuff that we love, and comics and movies and all that jazz. So that's it for tonight. Thank you guys very much for watching, and have a great night. See you next time.